They came without warning. One moment, the sky above Mars was calm and filled with the quiet hum of human trade ships. The next, it was fire. The first attack came so suddenly that most people didn't even understand what was happening. Defense satellites went dark one after another, cut off before they could send a single alert. The red horizon of Mars turned bright white as energy beams tore across the surface. It wasn't pirates or smugglers this time. Humanity had faced those before. This was something different. This was organized, powerful, and precise. The attackers came from beyond known space, an alliance of alien species who believed themselves to be the rightful rulers of the stars. For decades, they had watched humanity grow, expand, and build colonies. They didn't like what they saw. To them, humans were spreading too fast, claiming too many worlds, and developing technology that seemed far too advanced for such a young race. So they decided to strike first. They called it a preventive campaign, though to the humans who saw cities burn, it was nothing but war. The first targets were the colonies, Mars, Europa, Titan. Each fell in hours. The alien fleets were massive, their ships larger than anything humanity had ever built. They came in perfect formation, with shimmering shields and weapons that seemed unstoppable. The defenders fought back, but their missiles were shot down before reaching their marks. The planetary defense cannons fired until they overheated, then went silent. Across the network, emergency broadcasts filled the screens. Families screamed over comms, soldiers shouted for reinforcements, and commanders issued desperate calls to retreat. But there was nowhere to go. The invaders had cut off the jump gates and sealed every escape route. Within a day, Mars was lost. Within 3, the outer colonies followed. To the rest of the galaxy, it seemed like the story was already over. News channels across the star system spoke of the fall of Earth's colonies. The galactic media showed images of alien commanders giving speeches, claiming that this swift operation was necessary for galactic safety. They said humans were unpredictable, dangerous, and had to be controlled before they could cause harm. Many other civilizations, tired of human stubbornness and diplomacy, quietly agreed. But on Earth, there was no surrender. The leaders didn't issue statements or plead for peace. The global communication network, usually full of chatter, suddenly went quiet. Civilian transmissions stopped. The entertainment feeds, social channels, and even scientific exchanges all went dark at once. For the first time in centuries, Earth fell completely silent. The invaders mistook that silence for defeat. They thought humanity had finally accepted their fate. Some alien officers even celebrated early, laughing in their command halls and congratulating one another for ending the human problem. But others felt uneasy. Reports began to come in. Strange ones. Long-range scanners near the asteroid belt picked up large energy readings that didn't match any known pattern. Entire sections of Earth's orbital defense grid appeared inactive, yet no debris floated near them, as if they had simply vanished. And on Earth's surface, something even stranger happened. Every launch port was closed, but deep seismic activity suggested heavy movement underground. The alien intelligence teams tried to decode what was happening. They hacked into captured communication relays, listened to the few stray human signals left, and ran analysis after analysis. The results made no sense. There were no panic transmissions, no refugee fleets, no signs of surrender or rebuilding. Just silence, and beneath that silence, movement. Deep beneath the oceans, below the ice caps, and inside the hollowed-out mountains, human engineers were at work. Machines that had slept for decades were being reactivated. Storage bays opened to reveal long-hidden warships. Weapons that had never been shown to the galaxy were being powered up. While the invaders celebrated their quick victory, Earth was uniting in a way it never had before. For generations, humanity had been divided by politics, borders, and ideology. But now, with their colonies destroyed and their people scattered, they stood together. Every nation, every organization, every scientist and soldier came under one command. The old rivalries meant nothing anymore. The only thing that mattered was survival and justice. The meeting that followed was never broadcast, but every human leader attended. The words spoken that day would become legend later. There was no shouting, no anger, no chaos, just determination. The decision was unanimous. Humanity would not beg. They would not surrender. They would not let others decide their place in the stars. The invaders had struck first, but they would learn what it meant to push Earth too far. On the moon, Old military stations were brought back online. Massive cannons turned their aim toward the black of space. In orbit, engineers reprogrammed ships that had once been used for mining and exploration, turning them into weapons of war. Deep inside the oceans, submarine hangars opened, releasing vessels no alien had ever seen, black silent, and coated with materials that absorbed all signals. And then there were the hidden projects. For years, rumors had circulated about secret human research programs, experiments with AI warfare, adaptive armor, and dark energy propulsion. No one outside Earth ever confirmed it. But as the alien fleet continued its patrol near the asteroid belt, their sensors began picking up brief flashes of energy, as if something was moving between the rocks, fast, invisible, and watching them. The alien commanders dismissed it as sensor error. Their technology was advanced, their arrogance even more so. They believed humans were reckless, emotional beings incapable of real strategic depth. They thought this was the end. But on Earth, the preparation was reaching its peak. In hidden command centers, human strategists studied every movement of the invading fleet. They mapped out weak points, communication relays, and supply routes. They learned how the enemy thought, how they deployed, and what mistakes they made when overconfident. Every human scientist, engineer, and pilot became part of a single enormous effort, a global defense initiative that would change everything. Factories that once built cars now produced precision engines. Power plants were redirected to feed the growing war machine. Civilian AI networks were converted into military systems, learning faster with every second. Humanity's industries roared back to life, stronger than ever, but this time with one goal: to make sure no one could ever threaten Earth again. Outside observers noticed the change. Neighboring species began whispering among themselves. "Why has Earth gone dark?" they asked. "Why are the human colonies silent?" Some governments tried to contact the invaders asking what was happening, but even they received vague answers. "The human threat has been neutralized," the alien empire said proudly. They couldn't have been more wrong. In truth, the silence was not defeat. It was focus. Humanity was doing what it did best: adapting, learning, preparing. The people who survived the first attacks carried stories of loss, but also of determination. Families separated across colonies sent encrypted messages promising they would reunite. Soldiers who had escaped the fall of Mars swore to return. Engineers worked day and night to rebuild the fleets. Humanity had been hit hard, yes, but it was still standing. Somewhere deep in the Pacific, an old research base activated again. A voice echoed through the dark control room, calm but firm. "Phase 1 complete. Begin mobilization." Across the world, hidden installations responded with the same message. Engines ignited in underground silos. Massive hangar doors opened in mountain ranges. The ground trembled. Far above, alien patrols detected brief gravitational distortions near Earth's orbit, but they ignored them. To them, the planet looked quiet, harmless. But the silence was deceptive. Because when humans are pushed too far, they do not break. They change. And that change was already happening. In the coming days, the galaxy would realize something that no one had understood before. The quiet of Earth was not fear. It was the deep breath before a storm. The invasion had stopped, but the silence that followed was even heavier than war. Across the galaxy, everyone waited for Earth to speak, to send a message, to surrender, yet nothing came. Days turned into weeks and the quiet grew unnerving. The invaders expected begging, anger, or chaos, but Earth gave them none of it. In the alien command ships high above the ruined colonies, their officers stood watching Earth through cold, shining screens. The planet looked calm, too calm. From space, there were no flashes of resistance, no energy signatures of fleets preparing to attack, no global distress signals. They took that as proof that humanity had finally broken. But far beneath the surface, something else was happening. The silence wasn't weakness. It was planning. Under the blue oceans, deep inside ancient mountain ranges and hidden beneath polar ice, humanity was moving. Engineers, soldiers, scientists, and workers, all united under a single cause. They didn't waste time on speeches or revenge talks. They worked. They built. They adapted. The pain of loss turned into quiet determination. The humans had learned a lesson from history. They had faced disasters before: wars, famines, invasions, even near extinction. Every time they rebuilt stronger. Every time the world underestimated how fast they could change when pushed to the edge. In every corner of Earth, silent factories were coming back to life. Some had been closed for decades, relics of old wars and forgotten projects. Now their gates opened again. The air filled with the sound of engines, drills, and sparks. Massive machines began shaping metal for ships that no one outside the planet even knew existed. Human engineers worked day and night without rest. They didn't use flashy words like vengeance or glory. They used words like defense and reconstruction and unity. It was not just about payback. It was about never being vulnerable again. Underground command centers? Leaders watched the stars on giant screens. They studied every signal from the alien fleets, every pattern of movement. No one spoke loudly. The room was filled with quiet focus. Humanity wasn't just reacting anymore, they were thinking ahead. Even the people outside those centers could feel the change. Life on Earth had shifted. The usual noise of everyday life, music, advertisements, chatter, had faded. The cities were still but not lifeless. It was like the entire planet was holding its breath together. Children played quietly in shelters. Farmers grew food for the soldiers. Scientists stayed locked in labs, creating technologies that had been too dangerous or expensive before. Every person had a purpose. Every person was part of the plan. Meanwhile, in the alien empire's control center, confusion began to grow. Reports from their spies near Earth were strange and unclear. They said Earth had gone completely silent, but energy readings from the surface were rising. Factories that had been dormant for years were active again. Some satellites even caught glimpses of large objects being moved under the ocean, but the images were too blurred to identify. The alien commanders dismissed the reports at first. They believed humans were just trying to rebuild what they had lost. "Let them try," one of them said. "Their technology cannot match ours." They had said that before about other worlds too, and those worlds had fallen easily. But humanity was different. Their silence wasn't the silence of defeat. It was the silence of minds working in unison. Inside one of Earth's hidden shipyards, engineers tested a new kind of engine, one that didn't leave a visible trail in space. They called it the Ghost Drive. It allowed ships to move quietly through the dark without being detected by normal sensors. It was a piece of technology that most of the galaxy thought impossible. But humans had been working on it for decades, hidden under classified projects. Every breakthrough came from desperation, but also from creativity. That was humanity's strength. They didn't always invent first, but they always found ways to make things work better, faster, and smarter. In orbit around the moon, a small team worked on old war satellites, reprogramming them. These satellites had once been designed for observation. Now they became part of a new defensive web that could detect even the smallest movement in space. Earth would never be caught by surprise again. The aliens still didn't see the danger. They thought they had broken human spirit. But in truth, they had united it. Across the planet, old barriers disappeared. Countries that had once been rivals shared resources and knowledge. Scientists from every region joined forces in underground labs. For the first time in history, humanity wasn't divided by politics or money. They were one world with one purpose. The silence outside became the hum of progress inside. Ships began to take shape in secret hangars. They weren't the large, shiny ships the alien fleets used. They were smaller, darker, and built for purpose. Some were so heavily armored they could survive direct hits. Others were stealth designs meant to vanish into deep space. Each had a name, but none were announced publicly. Every new vessel carried a single message written somewhere inside it: never again. In the alien fleet, the commanders continued to patrol the solar system. They moved slowly between Mars and Earth, waiting for signs of resistance. Their sensors picked up small changes, heat signatures, brief power surges, but nothing they could trace. Some began to feel uneasy. One officer suggested pulling back the fleet a little, just in case. The higher leaders laughed at the idea. "They have nothing left," they said. "Earth is broken," but deep inside Earth, preparations were almost complete. Humans had reactivated old orbital cannons, restored damaged satellites, and built a new communication network that couldn't be hacked or jammed. The planet that looked quiet from space was now one massive machine, working together, moving in rhythm, preparing for the right moment. Every soldier, every engineer, every worker knew what was coming. They didn't know when it would begin, but they trusted it would. Humanity had lost the first battle, but the war wasn't over. It was only paused. In space, a strange thing began to happen. Some of the alien ships near the asteroid belt started to vanish. At first, their command thought it was technical failure. Then they realized there were no distress calls, no explosions, no wreckage, just sudden silence. Ships disappeared from sensors like shadows swallowed by darkness. They increased patrols, but the pattern continued. A ship would report in 1 minute and vanish the next. No one saw who or what was responsible. What the aliens didn't know was that the first wave of human stealth ships had already left Earth. They moved like ghosts through the darkness, invisible to standard scanners. They didn't attack yet, they were just watching, learning, gathering information. Humanity wanted to know everything before striking back. The alien officers grew frustrated. Their world is dead, they said again and again. There is no way they can still fight. But they were wrong, and deep down they were beginning to feel it. On Earth, the silent preparations continued. In one vast underground chamber, a massive warship was being completed. Its hull was black, its engines silent. When powered on, it absorbed light instead of reflecting it. It wasn't designed to be seen. It was designed to appear only once, and only to those who had earned humanity's wrath. When the final tests were done, the engineers stood back in awe. They had created something powerful, not just from technology, but from willpower. It wasn't just a ship, it was a message. Outside, the stars looked peaceful, unaware that something was coming. The invaders waited for humanity to beg for mercy. They didn't know that Earth had already decided there would be no begging, no surrender. The quiet planet they looked at with arrogance was no longer just a home. It had become a fortress. And behind that calm blue glow, billions of hearts were beating as one, waiting for the command that would change everything, because humanity had stopped talking. It had stopped explaining, apologizing, and negotiating. It had chosen action over words. The aliens had struck first. But now the galaxy was about to learn why you never push Earth too far. The alien fleet still floated near the edge of the solar system, confident that the silence from Earth meant the war was won. Their massive ships hung like dark mountains among the stars, shields glowing faintly, weapons ready but unused. They had begun to relax, convinced that the humans had no strength left to fight back. But something strange was happening. Their sensors had started to behave oddly. Small readings appeared and disappeared near the asteroid belt. Tiny flashes, energy blips that didn't match any known pattern. Some officers called them glitches. Others whispered that it might be leftover debris from the first battle. But deep down, many felt uneasy. Then one night, an entire patrol vanished. The ships were there one moment and gone the next. No alarms, no distress calls, not even an explosion. Just silence. When the command ships tried to reach them, there was no response, only empty static. The higher leaders dismissed it, calling it technical failure. They didn't know they had just witnessed the beginning of humanity's return. Far below, on the surface of Earth, the hidden command centers came alive. Screens flickered with data as human crews monitored the alien fleet's every move. The time for silence was ending. Humanity had been patient long enough. For months, the world had been preparing in secret. Now every system was ready. The reactivated defense network surrounded Earth like an invisible web. New ships waited in deep tunnels, sealed under oceans and mountains, ready to rise at a single command. Inside one of those massive underground bases, a calm voice spoke through the comm system. All units, prepare for launch. The order moved across the planet like a quiet wave. In hidden silos, engines came to life. The air trembled as massive platforms opened in the ground, revealing ships that no one outside Earth had ever seen. Their dark surfaces shimmered faintly, absorbing the light instead of reflecting it. They were built not for beauty, but for power and precision. The first of these ships rose slowly into the air. It made no sound, just a deep vibration that shook the Earth around it. As it climbed higher, it disappeared into the night sky, leaving only wind and silence behind. One after another, more ships followed. Soon, hundreds were rising across the planet, hidden from sight, shielded by cloaking technology that bent light and energy around them. From space, the alien fleets saw nothing. Their scanners showed an empty planet. Their commanders continued their patrols, unaware that an entire armada was forming below them. The first wave of human ships reached orbit quietly. They took positions behind moons, asteroids, and debris fields. Their systems synced automatically, forming a network that allowed them to share vision and data instantly. It was something no alien fleet had ever seen before, a fighting force that thought and moved as one. The human crews were focused, silent, ready. They didn't see themselves as soldiers of revenge. They were protectors, defenders of everything they loved. They had lost families, homes, and entire worlds. But they had also learned. The final message from Earth was short and simple. No mercy. No surrender. No warning. And then the order came. The first human strike was silent. A small fleet of stealth ships approached one of the alien command stations near Mars. They moved so quietly that the station's sensors didn't even detect them until it was too late. Within seconds, the entire base went dark. Communication lines cut. Power vanished. By the time the aliens tried to understand what was happening, their main reactors overloaded, and the station disappeared in a burst of light. The alien fleet scrambled, their alarms ringing through the decks. Ships turned, scanning every direction, trying to find the attacker. But there was nothing on their screens, only the echo of their own panic. Then another one vanished, and another. Every time they tried to locate the enemy, the attackers had already moved. It was as if the shadows themselves had come alive. The aliens fired wildly into space, desperate to hit something, anything. But the human ships were already gone, darting between asteroids, using gravity and stealth to hide. The galaxy had always seen humanity as reckless and emotional. But what they were witnessing now was cold, calculated precision. Humanity had turned silence into strategy. Back on Earth, Command watched every second unfold. They didn't celebrate. They didn't cheer. They simply continued to track targets, calculate paths, and direct the next phase. The humans knew this wasn't just about winning. It was about sending a message. In a single night, the alien empire lost half of its forward fleet. Entire sectors went quiet. When they tried to retreat, their navigation systems began to fail. Something was jamming them. Something new. Something human. The invaders had believed Earth was far behind in technology. They were wrong. Humanity had never stopped advancing. They had just hidden their best creations. The galaxy had no idea what humans were truly capable of because Earth had always held back. Until now, the aliens finally saw their first glimpse of the new human ships. One of their patrols managed to catch a visual just before being destroyed. The ship appeared out of nowhere, sleek black with no visible engines. Its surface shimmered like liquid metal, and before they could even react, a beam of blue light tore through their hull. The surviving officers sent a single message to their command. "They're here." After that, the rest of the message was static. Panic spread across the alien network. Commanders shouted orders, fleets tried to regroup, and emergency signals filled the air. But the chaos only made them easier to track. The humans had studied them carefully. They knew their patterns, their reaction times, their weaknesses. Every move they made was expected. In less than 48 hours, humanity had reclaimed the space between Earth and Mars. The colonies were still in ruins, but now they belonged to humans again. The alien forces were scattered, their morale broken. When word reached the higher council of the alien empire, disbelief turned to fear. They had crushed countless civilizations before, and none had ever fought back like this. Humanity was supposed to be primitive, disorganized, emotional, but now they were facing a force that fought like a machine and struck like lightning. They sent new fleets toward Earth, larger ones, filled with reinforcements. But even as those fleets approached, something unexpected happened. Their long-range scanners went blind. Communications failed. It was as if the void itself had swallowed every signal. When they entered Earth's space, they finally saw it, the human defense grid. Massive satellites and platforms surrounded the planet, powered by energy so intense it made their shields flicker, and waiting beyond that line, invisible until the last second, were the human ships. For a moment, everything was still. Both sides faced each other in silence, the darkness between them glowing faintly from the reflection of distant stars. Then humanity spoke, not through words but through action. The second battle for Earth began. It was fast, brutal, and completely one-sided. Human ships didn't move like the aliens expected. They didn't form lines or clusters. They swarmed, vanished, reappeared, hit from angles that defied normal tactics. Every human weapon was precise. Every shot hit its mark. The alien fleets had superior numbers, but that didn't matter anymore. The humans weren't fighting for conquest, they were fighting for survival. And survival made them unstoppable. Hours later, the battle was over. The sky above Earth was littered with debris from the once proud alien armada. The few remaining ships tried to retreat, but the humans didn't chase them. They simply let them go. The message had been delivered. In the command centers below, no one celebrated. They just stood in silence, watching the screens. The losses had been heavy, but the victory was complete. Humanity had proven a truth older than any empire. When pushed too far, humans don't break. They become something else entirely. And as the quiet settled over the planet again, the galaxy began to understand. The humans had been peaceful because they chose to be. But peace was not weakness, it was restraint. Now that restraint was gone, and the universe would never look at Earth the same way again. The invaders had struck first. But now they knew why you never push Earth too far. The silence after the second battle was strange. Space around Earth was filled with broken ships and scattered debris, but the planet below was calm. People looked up at the sky and saw something they hadn't seen in months. Hope. The enemy had been pushed back, and humanity had taken its first real breath since the invasion began. But far beyond the solar system, the rest of the galaxy was in shock. The alien empire that had attacked Earth was supposed to be unstoppable. They had conquered dozens of worlds before, each one falling quickly under their power. Yet this time, things had gone differently. This time their fleet had been shattered, their pride crushed, and their commanders humiliated. Rumors began spreading fast. Stories of human warships that appeared out of nowhere, of invisible fleets that struck like shadows and vanished again. Some said Earth had awakened ancient weapons. Others whispered that humans had made a pact with something powerful and unseen. No one knew what was true, but everyone agreed on one thing. Earth was no longer just another planet. Inside the alien empire's council chambers, fear replaced arrogance. Their leaders shouted over one another, trying to explain what had happened. They blamed poor strategy, bad intelligence, and even sabotage. But deep down, they knew the truth. They had underestimated humanity. In their desperation, they sent more fleets, larger, stronger, filled with their most advanced ships. They thought numbers could make up for their mistakes. But before they could even reach the Sol system, something unexpected happened. Their ships started disappearing again. Not in battle, not from weapon fire. They simply went missing. One moment a fleet would report in, and the next, silence. When smaller scout vessels were sent to investigate, they found nothing. No wreckage, no signals, no signs of struggle. It was as if the void had swallowed them whole. The alien commanders grew terrified. They began to suspect that the humans weren't fighting a normal war anymore. This wasn't defense, it was strategy. The humans weren't waiting for attacks, they were already inside the enemy's systems, learning, adapting, and striking from places no one could detect. Back on Earth, that was exactly what was happening. The human fleet had changed the way war worked. They didn't fight for territory or power. They fought to end the threat completely. Every ship was part of a living network, connected by artificial intelligence that could predict movements before they happened. The crews trusted the system, and the system trusted them. Together, they had become something far more dangerous than the galaxy had ever seen, a species that could fight as one mind. In the underground command rooms, the screens were filled with moving dots, enemy fleets, supply lines, communication routes. Human officers studied them carefully, marking weaknesses and preparing new missions. Each operation was precise, quiet, and fast. No unnecessary battles, no wasted lives. Every move had a purpose. One by one, the alien strongholds began to fall. Some were destroyed by direct attacks. Others were shut down from the inside, their systems taken over by human viruses that rewrote code and locked out their own crews. The humans didn't need to send large armies anymore. A few well-placed ships and a single strike were enough. Across the galaxy, fear spread faster than light. Worlds that had once followed the alien empire now hesitated. Their leaders began to question whether the humans were truly as fragile as everyone had believed. For years, the galaxy had looked at Earth and seen a young, reckless species still finding its place. Now they saw something very different, a quiet, focused power that had learned how to survive anything. Meanwhile, the people of Earth were rebuilding. Cities that had been destroyed were being restored. Families who had lost everything began to return to their homes. Humanity didn't celebrate loudly. There were no parades, no songs of victory, just a shared sense of strength, a silent promise that they would never let this happen again. In schools, children learned not only about the attack, but about the unity that followed. Teachers told them that the reason Earth survived wasn't because of weapons or ships, but because people stood together. It was the first time in history that humanity truly acted as one. But even as peace began to return to Earth, the war beyond the stars was far from over. In a distant part of the galaxy, the alien empire's capital trembled under growing pressure. Their fleets were weaker than ever, their supply lines in chaos. The leaders couldn't hide the truth anymore. The war they had started was turning against them. And worst of all, their soldiers had begun to lose faith. Stories of human tactics spread through their ranks like fire. They said the humans could appear anywhere, that no base was safe, that every move was watched. The Empire tried to stop the rumors, but it was too late. Fear had already taken hold. In one of the Empire's last meetings, a nervous advisor finally asked the question everyone had avoided. What if they come here? The room fell silent. No one answered. They all knew it was possible. Back in the Sol system, the human commanders discussed their next move. They had won the defense of Earth, but the threat still existed. The aliens could regroup, rebuild, and attack again one day. Humanity couldn't allow that. The order was simple: end the war completely. A fleet was assembled, not for revenge, but for protection. It was humanity's largest force yet, made of the new generation ships built after the battle for Earth. Each vessel carried advanced stealth systems and adaptive weapons that could learn during combat. The fleet's goal was not to destroy planets, but to dismantle the Empire's power forever. When they finally launched, the galaxy watched in silence. At first, no one even noticed them leave. Then, days later, reports came in. Entire enemy outposts going dark, fleets disappearing, communications collapsing. The humans moved quickly and quietly, leaving nothing behind but silence. On some worlds, the alien civilians looked up at the sky and saw the dark silhouettes of human ships passing through orbit. But there were no attacks. No cities were harmed. The humans weren't interested in hurting the innocent. They targeted only the ones who had brought war to Earth. It was a message the galaxy would never forget. When the human fleet finally reached the Empire's capital system, there was no speech, no demand for surrender. They simply appeared, thousands of ships, silent and steady, surrounding the Empire's last fortress. The alien rulers tried to open communication, to negotiate, but the humans didn't respond. They didn't need to. Their presence was enough. In that moment, the once mighty Empire realized it was over. They had started a war they could never win. Back on Earth, the people waited for news. When it finally came, it was only a single message from the fleet. It's done. No one cheered, no one shouted. Instead, the entire planet stayed quiet for a few moments, as if remembering every life lost, every sacrifice made. Humanity had defended itself, and won. After that day, the galaxy changed. Every civilization, every species began to treat Earth differently. No longer as a young world trying to prove itself, but as a force that demanded respect. Some called it fear, but those who understood humans knew better. It wasn't about fear, it was about recognition. Humanity didn't seek control. They didn't build empires or demand tribute. They simply rebuilt their world and made one quiet promise to the stars. If peace was respected, they would never strike first. But if anyone dared to threaten Earth again, the universe already knew how that story would end. In time, the wreckage of the invasion faded from memory, Space returned to its usual calm. But deep down, everyone remembered the lesson. Never mistake Earth's silence for weakness. Never assume patience means fear. And above all, never push humanity too far, because when they are pushed to the edge, they become something the galaxy cannot stop. After the war ended, the stars finally grew quiet again. The sound of explosions and alarms faded, replaced by the soft hum of peace returning to the galaxy. Earth, once scarred by fire and fear, was healing. Cities that had been reduced to ashes began to rise again. Fields that were empty for months started to bloom with life. Humanity, for the first time in years, felt safe. But safety didn't come easily. The memories of what had happened still haunted people. They remembered the first attack, the loss, the silence after. They remembered what it felt like to see the sky filled with enemy ships. Even after victory, the pain remained like a scar, reminding them that peace had a price. The leaders of Earth decided not to let that pain be forgotten. They built monuments across the world, not to celebrate war, but to remember unity. Each one carried the same message carved in stone. Never again divided, never again unprepared. People from every nation visited these places to pay respect. They came not just to honor the soldiers, but to remember the moment humanity became one. At the same time, the space fleets that had defended Earth didn't disappear. They evolved. The fleets were reorganized into what people called the Guardians. Their duty wasn't conquest. It was protection. Every ship patrolled the edges of known space, making sure no one ever came close to Earth uninvited. But even as they stood guard, there was something else happening quietly behind the scenes. A new project was born. It wasn't about weapons or war. It was about understanding. The scientists and engineers of Earth wanted to know why the alien empire had attacked in the first place. They wanted to understand what had made them see humans as a threat or a target. So they started sending exploration teams beyond the old battle zones to gather data, to talk to those who once fought against them, and to learn from what happened. To everyone's surprise, some alien worlds welcomed them. These were the planets that had once lived under the Empire's rule, oppressed, taxed, and silenced. They had suffered too. When the humans destroyed the Empire's control, those worlds finally became free. So when human ships arrived, they weren't greeted with fear but with gratitude. For many of those alien species, humanity wasn't a monster. It was a symbol of hope. The humans didn't arrive as rulers. They arrived as friends. They shared medicine, technology, and helped rebuild cities that had been damaged during the fall of the Empire. They offered advice on defense but never forced anyone to follow them. This simple approach surprised the galaxy. Most expected humanity to use its new power to dominate others. But Earth didn't want that. All they wanted was peace. Slowly, the balance of the galaxy began to shift. Species that once lived in fear started to unite under something new, an alliance based on mutual respect. Not an empire, not a hierarchy, just cooperation. And at the heart of that alliance was Earth. While all of this was happening, the remaining leaders of the fallen alien empire were hiding. Scattered across distant corners of space, they refused to accept defeat. They believed humans had cheated, that their victory couldn't be natural. Some even began to spread stories again, trying to turn other civilizations against Earth. But the galaxy didn't listen anymore. Too many had seen what humans were capable of, not just in war but in compassion. When famine struck one of the outer worlds, it wasn't the old empire that sent help. It was Earth. When disease spread through a colony of another species, human doctors risked their lives to bring cures. Wherever there was pain, humans showed up, not with weapons, but with hands ready to help. Yet deep within the quiet corners of the galaxy, a new problem was growing. Not everyone liked this new balance. There were factions, remnants of the old empire, who wanted revenge. They began building secret stations, gathering what ships they could salvage. They studied human technology, trying to copy it, trying to find a weakness. To them, the defeat wasn't over. It was just paused. Back on Earth, intelligence units started picking up strange signals, disrupted transmissions, coded messages bouncing between forgotten outposts. Something was moving in the dark. The commanders met in silence, studying the patterns. They knew what it meant. The enemy was trying again, but this time humanity was ready. A small team of reconnaissance ships was sent out, not to start a war, but to find the truth. They didn't fly in force. They moved quietly, avoiding detection. The mission was clear: uncover the enemy's plans before another attack could happen. What they found was worse than expected. Hidden inside a dense nebula was a massive structure. Part base, part weapon factory. It was building new fleets stronger and more advanced than before. But this time it wasn't the old empire alone. They had allies. Several rogue groups from different species had joined them, all bound by one goal: to strike Earth before it could respond. The human scouts returned with evidence. When the footage was shown to the Global Council, the room went silent. It wasn't fear anymore, it was determination. Humanity had promised peace, but they would never allow another invasion. Within days, the Guardians were mobilized. Fleets left Earth's orbit silently, one after another, forming a shadow in the stars. But there was something different about this mission. It wasn't about destroying everything in sight. It was about stopping a war before it could begin. When the human fleet arrived near the nebula, they didn't attack immediately. Instead, they sent a single signal, a warning. It was simple and calm: stand down. Do not repeat history. For hours there was no reply. Then a message came back. It was full of arrogance, threats, and promises of vengeance. The enemy hadn't learned, so the humans made their choice. The battle that followed was swift and precise. There were no speeches, no grand displays of power. The Guardians moved like a storm, fast, invisible, unstoppable. The enemy fleet barely had time to fight back. Their command systems were hacked, their weapons silenced, their ships disabled rather than destroyed. Within a few hours, the entire threat was neutralized. When the fighting ended, the human commander sent one final message: we seek peace, not conquest. Do not mistake mercy for weakness. The galaxy watched again as the news spread. Some called it another miracle. Others called it balance restored. But for humanity, it wasn't about pride. It was about survival, about keeping the promise they made after the first invasion, that they would protect not just themselves, but the peace that so many had died for. Months later, when the dust settled, a new era began. The alliance that had slowly formed around Earth grew stronger. It wasn't perfect, no alliance ever is, but it worked. Trade routes opened, cultural exchanges began, and people from different worlds started to understand each other in ways they never had before. For the first time in galactic history, unity felt possible. On Earth, life continued to move forward. Children grew up learning about the wars, but also about what came after. They were taught that courage wasn't about fighting. It was about standing for what's right, even when it's hard. They were taught that peace isn't given. It's built day by day, choice by choice. The sky, once filled with fear, now carried something beautiful: hope. At night, people would look up and see the faint lines of ships orbiting the planet, the Guardians watching quietly, not as symbols of war, but as reminders that humanity was ready, always prepared and never again alone. Far away, in the distant reaches of the galaxy, the last surviving members of the old empire watched this change with disbelief. They couldn't understand how a species once seen as weak had become the very thing holding the galaxy together. But deep down, even they knew the truth: humanity had done what no one else could. They had turned pain into unity, fear into purpose, and conflict into strength. And so, peace returned. Not perfect, not eternal, but real. The stars glowed brighter, carrying silent stories of the past. The story of a small blue planet that refused to bow down, a people who learned to stand as one, and a truth that echoed across the galaxy. You can challenge Earth. You can test their strength. But once they rise together, nothing in the universe can stand against them, because humans don't fight to destroy. They fight to protect what they love, and that is what makes them unstoppable. Years passed, and the scars of war faded into quiet stories told under the stars. The galaxy had changed forever. The old empires that once ruled with fear were now only shadows of history. New worlds rose from the ashes, guided not by control but by understanding. And at the center of this new age stood Earth. But Earth had also changed. The humans who once saw the stars as unreachable now looked at them as home. Colonies spread across distant worlds, not as conquerors but as neighbors. The humans didn't build walls. They built bridges. They shared what they learned: medicine, energy, communication, farming, and in return they listened. They listened to stories from other species, to songs sung in voices so different from their own. They began to understand that the galaxy was not just a place to survive, but a place to belong. The great fleets that once roamed the void now watched over trade routes, helping travelers cross dangerous zones safely. Spaceports that were once used for war became centers of learning and cooperation. And everywhere the humans went, they carried one belief: peace is stronger than fear. But peace is not the absence of danger. It's the choice to stay kind even when danger returns. One evening, far beyond Earth's orbit, a quiet alarm echoed through one of the Guardian stations. The sensors had detected something unusual, a massive energy fluctuation from an uncharted region of space. It wasn't a weapon, but it wasn't natural either. No one knew what it was. Within hours, the Council on Earth gathered. Some feared it was another attempt by the remnants of the old empire. Others believed it could be something new, something even greater. The decision was made quickly. Instead of sending warships, humanity sent explorers, scientists, engineers, diplomats, people trained not to destroy but to understand. When the expedition reached the source, what they found wasn't an army or a threat. It was a dying star system, a small planet caught between collapsing suns, and on that planet lived a species the galaxy had never seen before. Weak, starving, desperate. Their cities were sinking, their skies filled with storms, and their people had no hope left. Without hesitation, the humans landed. They didn't wait for permission or for alliances to form. They began helping. They built shelters, purified water, repaired energy systems. For days and nights they worked side by side with the dying people of that world. Word spread quickly. Across the galaxy, species that once feared Earth now watched with awe. The humans had no reason to help these strangers. There was no profit, no advantage. And yet they did it anyway. It wasn't long before others followed. Ships from different worlds arrived, not to fight but to help. Engineers from distant moons worked beside human scientists. Medics from alien stations treated the sick. Slowly, the dying planet began to breathe again. When the storms finally settled and the skies cleared, something beautiful happened. The people of that planet, weak and broken just days before, stood together and whispered words that would echo for generations. They came for nothing but kindness. That was when the galaxy truly understood humanity. It wasn't their ships or their weapons that made them powerful. It wasn't even their technology. It was their heart, their refusal to turn away when someone was in pain. As years passed, stories like this spread everywhere. Children on alien worlds learned about Earth not as a threat, but as a protector. In schools across the galaxy, teachers spoke of the time humans stood up when no one else dared, and how they never asked for anything in return. For some, it became a legend. For others, a lesson, and so a saying was born. Words whispered in markets, in spaceports, in every corner of every world. Never push Earth too far, for they carry peace in one hand and strength in the other. It wasn't a warning anymore. It was respect. Even the few who still hated Earth began to understand. The humans didn't want control. They wanted connection. They didn't rule with fear. They led with example, and slowly, even their enemies began to let go of their anger. Back on Earth, life moved at a peaceful rhythm. The planet had become a symbol of unity. Festivals were held to celebrate not just human history, but the friendship of many worlds. Songs from dozens of species filled the air together. Oceans reflected lights from ships that came from galaxies away. For the first time in history, peace didn't feel temporary. It felt real. But humans never forgot what it took to reach this moment. They remembered the silence before the storm, the fear of invasion, the loss that brought them together. Those memories stayed alive in museums, in books, and in stories passed from one generation to the next. Old veterans told their grandchildren, "We fought not to destroy others, but to protect each other." Scientists reminded students, "Power means nothing if it cannot build." And every year, on the day the first invasion began, the whole planet fell silent for 1 minute, to remember the cost of peace. Up in the orbiting stations, the Guardians still watched the stars. Not out of fear, but duty. They understood something deeper now, that peace must be protected not by threats, but by readiness. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were guardians in the truest sense. One evening, as the sun dipped below Earth's horizon, the commander of the Guardians looked out from his observation deck. The blue planet shimmered beneath him, calm and beautiful. Around it floated ships from hundreds of worlds, symbols of friendship and trust. He smiled softly, knowing what it meant. Humanity had done it. Not through dominance, but through understanding. Far across the galaxy, historians began writing a new chapter, a chapter that didn't start with war, but with healing. They called it the Age of Balance. This new age wasn't perfect. There were still disagreements, still misunderstandings, but there was something stronger than fear, holding the galaxy together now: mutual respect. Every time someone tried to stir hatred or spread lies, others stood up and said, "No more." That was Earth's true victory. Not the battles they won, but the hearts they changed. And so, when new explorers from distant galaxies finally arrived, curious beings who had never heard of Earth, the first thing they asked was not about technology or war. They asked, is it true what they say, that the humans are the keepers of peace? And those who lived through it would smile and answer, yes, but don't mistake their kindness for weakness. Generations passed, and the legend of Earth continued to grow. In time, no one remembered the names of the old empires, but everyone remembered the planet that stood its ground when all hope seemed lost. In the farthest colonies, travelers still told the tale, the story of how the humans faced invasion, endured silence, and rose with strength that came not from hatred, but from unity. They spoke of how Earth didn't seek revenge but justice, how they didn't destroy but rebuilt, how they taught the galaxy that true power is not found in fear, but in compassion. And every time someone doubted, they would look up at the stars, see a faint blue light in the distance, and whisper to themselves, that is Earth, the world that stood when no one else did. In the end, humanity's greatest achievement wasn't the ships they built or the wars they survived. It was that they changed the very meaning of strength. Strength was no longer about destruction. It was about endurance. It was about kindness that never broke and courage that never faded. The galaxy had finally learned the truth. The humans were not the monsters some once believed them to be. They were the guardians of peace, the builders of hope, and the quiet promise that as long as they existed, no darkness could last forever. And so, under the vast, endless night sky, one truth remained, simple, eternal, and unforgettable. You may strike first. You may test their limits, but once you push Earth too far, you awaken not their rage, but their unity. And that unity is something no power in the universe can ever defeat.